Thank you. It's great to be here. It's really good. For somebody who doesn't bet, I really enjoy the space. I was driving up here listening to VSiN, and I was listening to Mitch and Paulie's show. And, you know, yesterday was kind of a worlds collide of sports. We had college basketball. We had Major League. We had hockey. We had the NBA, Lakers playing, all that. Guess what the number one bet game was yesterday? The number one game that people bet on yesterday in all sports.
Kentucky, Michigan State.
How about Kent State, Toledo? The MAC, which is remarkable, right? Like, who would even think of that? Although if you've bet against Akron and you've taken my advice, you've made a fortune because Akron can't cover any spread. They can't get that right. But it's great to be here. I think football, the power of football has been remarkable, but the power of betting in all sports has been remarkable. I think the interest, because people can bet on all these sports, has helped the television ratings, which has helped the players, which has helped everybody in the industry. So I'm honored to be here. I appreciate Wayne and everybody at 76 Capital to be here. But first of all, I want to start off this. I'm not sure how I got this job as being a panel host, but I appreciate it. I know there's a lot of people smarter than me up here on this tape. But what I want to start off with, in the short span of 18 months, and all these questions were kindly prepared for me, 19 states have jurisdiction, the U.S. passed sports betting legislation. Where do we expect the next 18 months to hold in this industry? I'll start with you, Doctor.
Yeah. First of all, hello, everyone. So I think when PASPA was repealed last year, nobody really expected to have 19 states that have legalized sports betting so far. So the development went faster than most experts would have thought, which is a very good sign. And seeing revenue numbers in New Jersey and other states is basically encouraging other states to start legislating sports betting, which is great for the industry. So in the next 18 months, we will have, of course, more states that have legalized sports betting, for sure. We have now probably a third of the US population that has access to legalized sports betting. We should not forget that before PASPA was repealed, 200 billion US dollars were basically bet by US citizens in the offshore markets. So keeping that into consideration, these are people that bet on sports, even though it was not allowed, it was illegal. They did that in the offshore market. So I think that shows you the dimension and the amount of money that we're talking about. And I have really, I can only imagine that it will be a great, huge, multi-billion-dollar market, and we will have more states legalizing sports betting, for sure.
Matt?
I think it's the move west. I think the Midwest is gonna happen next year in 2020. You know, Illinois just legislated, Ohio, Michigan. I think it's the move westward, and then on from there. Colorado's got had a referendum. I also think that it's probably in the next year or 18 months, maybe 2 years, when Pennsylvania becomes probably the largest market, if not Illinois.
Wow. Kenny, how do you see it going for Major League Baseball as it affects, and you know, Major League Baseball is interesting because you got so many games, so many events, and how people bet it. But where do you think this is going to take off? Will there ever be in-game betting at the stadium for Major League Baseball like we see in soccer?
Sure, that was a different question that I was about to answer, but that's fine too. Yeah, I mean, I think just looking back at the last 18 months and the next 18 months, right now it's all about, you know, setting up the rules. And, you know, when you think about it in terms of baseball, it's like painting the lines and you're letting people into the stadium. And the next 18 months will be a continuation of that, sort of getting the rules in place. And I'll come to your specific question in a second. And then actually seeing what happens from there and what sort of innovation happens. So once all the laws get passed and we figure out who can operate in this state, who can operate in that state, and we as the league start to figure out how do we, you know, best work within this framework, and you know, we're evaluating our rules now for things like you're talking about in stadium betting. There will, if we had a team located physically in New Jersey, you know, I'd say there'd be well, I guess in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, there's mobile betting, so there'll be in-stadium betting in both of our ballparks in Pennsylvania next year because everyone has a sports book in their pocket. You know, they'll have, you know, a Parx app or a FanDuel app or a DraftKings app, and they'll be betting. So whether or not you actually need kiosks or windows in the stadium. I don't. It may happen. It may not. We'll sort of see how the rules go. But I don't think that's what's important. I think what's important is to be able to engage with the game on your mobile device, whether you're sitting in the stadium watching it live or at home on your couch or, on the train from New York to a conference in Philadelphia and playing with it in different states.
Have you seen a spike in viewer interest in terms of their attention span? I mean, it seems like baseball is a game people can come in and out of and kind of catch. Do you feel like you have the viewers' interest more because they bet on the game?
It's just way too early for that for us. We want to get there, and we think that's right. But when you look at where sports betting was legal this past year, it was really only New Jersey that's been new, where this past season we had any material amount of sports betting. Pennsylvania came on really right at the end of the season. So as far as seeing what the effects on our ratings will be, I think that's a 2020 question and sort of beyond. But we certainly want to take advantage of that and try to create products that will get people to watch more and go to the games more.
How about you, Sarah?
Yeah, I think it's going to result in two things, more innovation and more partnership. So as this continues to roll out in more states, it's going to get further refined as far as mobile capabilities, in-play betting at some point in time. That is certainly down the road. But, there was a study that came out from Geolocation Services or testimony that was shared yesterday. Geolocation basically makes sure that in Pennsylvania, if you're on your phone, you're in Pennsylvania and you're not in another state where it's illegal. And what they were demonstrating is that people were actually driving to rest stops in Indiana to be able to place a bet from other states where they can't bet legally right now. So I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of pressure that are put on states that have either legalized with just a brick and mortar opportunity right now to add mobile to that platform, as well as then more innovation around sports betting. The second piece of this is partnership. I obviously came from the casino industry side, led the American Gaming Association and our members in wanting to see legalization, have sat next to Kenny on plenty of panels that were a little bit more tumultuous, I should say. But look, from where we were 18 months ago to where we are today, it seems like every single day the league is announcing some new partnership with a gaming operator. That pressure is just going to have to continue and increase, especially when you see what happened in Colorado last night. The results were very, very tight for a referendum that, quite frankly, everyone wants to get passed. And so that need for partnership is really going to increase.
It was interesting how they worded that referendum, though. I mean, they worded it
terrible.
so complicated.
It was terrible. It's a lobbyist nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be when I worked in the NFL, the owners would go into a meeting, one per club, and I would be like, that's almost illegal. They can't make up, they need a lawyer next to them. That was so poorly written. I think if it was written clearer, it would have been passed. How about you, Davyeon? What are your thoughts?
Well, I'd like to take a more in line with the spin of innovation and data, because I think these guys have more expertise in regards to the laws and that type of stuff. But I think you're going to see a ton of innovation in this space. You're going to see a ton of need for the level of integrity that's necessary as it relates to data. You're going to see a lot of technologies come in that can, speed up the process of data aggregation. If you think about, right now we're making a fairly innovative turn as a society, right? But if you think about the data collection mechanisms and the aggregation of data, it's fairly historical and archaic, right? We're still sitting there. Even if you look at, I was in Vegas at a large company and they were literally watching the game and manually statting it. And if we think about what happened in high frequency trading, where, that went online and people were starting to try to put servers closer to the servers of the exchanges to be able to get access to that data in a very timely sub-second manner. So I think that, I get excited about it because I think that space and the opportunity there is just really ripe for disruption.
Nevada has always been the number one gaming, but last month we saw New Jersey move into that space and increase the play. Give us your reaction of where that's going to go and how that's going to be perceived going forward. Because I keep hearing, all these, I laugh about the sport book guys. They always are complaining that they got hit hard, and yet you look around and these facilities are amazing, right? Nobody's getting hit hard if that. So somebody's winning, obviously, right?
Yeah, no doubt. I think I said before, Pennsylvania is the second largest gaming state in the U.S. So I mean, I think it's only a matter of time with the population here that it moves ahead of both of those states. It's just we've been live with online and mobile betting for what, 4 months now, and retail sports betting for an additional 10 months. So it's just a matter of time before PA eclipses New Jersey and Nevada, and then you got bigger states like Illinois. Who knows what's going to happen out with the tribes and the tracks in California? But eventually, I do believe it's all going to move west.
Yeah, it's a little bit like when you were in college and you live in Pennsylvania. You went to college in Pennsylvania. They had state stores, right? I think they still have state stores in Pennsylvania, right? You had to drive over to Jersey to get your beer because you couldn't have to, you had to go to all the weird places. You know, I think that's a little bit like with this gambling thing. Is you're driving over state lines, right?
Yeah, and I was just going to add to that point. I mean, I know this panel is largely about sports betting, and we've just been talking about Davyeon talking about the innovation that's happening, quite frankly, in the casino industry. This is an industry that has been largely focused in the brick and mortar experience and on the retail side. And what we've seen now is an opening for mobile through the lens of sports betting, but where you're really seeing money coming in is through the casino, online casino now that's available. And so I think you're going to see a lot more innovation as we got back to this again from the casino industry's perspective that quite frankly has not happened for the past 50 years. I mean, this is an industry that has not been online, and you look at payments and everything else that's going to transform through that, and so it's really going to be a massive change for the casino industry as well.
Don't you think, too, from a legislative standpoint, that with all the states that are enacting legislation for sports betting, that iGaming is only going to follow?
Absolutely. It's a camel's nose under the tent. I mean, it is, we'll start with sports betting, and then, where the real money is going to be generated is absolutely going to be through online slots. And I think the other thing, too, that's going to happen, and we're seeing this with sports betting, is you're getting regulators to talk to one another, too, to start streamlining regulations, to have more, I shouldn't say inefficiencies, efficiencies, and even working in partnership with the leagues to address some issues as well. So it couldn't have been a better thing, I think, for the industry for this to happen.
But what you really also need to keep in mind, Nevada had a monopoly on sports betting in the US for so long. No offense, but they didn't have to innovate. They didn't have to invest in new technologies. They didn't have a reason because they had the monopoly. So now they have New Jersey being head-on-head, basically, in terms of revenues. New Jersey is a very competitive market with 22 different brands being live right now. And that basically leads to operators to be more innovative. So they need a product that's a differentiator in the market. And I think companies like ShotTracker that are collecting real-time data that nobody has, very unique data points, will disrupt the market, will lead to better products. So it's a win-win situation in terms of customers, but will also innovate the way people collect data. So I used to run Sportradar US for the last 3 years before basically exiting and advising now companies in the space. And we had like 5,000-6,000 data journalists that we sent to the venues to collect data manually. And it's nothing bad about Sportradar because all the big data companies do it that way, which is crazy. Come on. We have 2019 and we have devices and manually collect data. I mean, people make mistakes. Why can we not have an automated system to collect data? And I think companies that collect data, and speaking about ShotTracker, I learned from these guys, a blink of an eye takes 600 milliseconds. They collect data in blink of an eye takes 400 milliseconds. They collect data in 8 milliseconds. So it's crazy what you can do with the data. You cannot even use that data to explain what's happening and why it's happening on the pitch. You can also use the data to predict what's happening next and explain that, put that in interesting products by applying AI and deeper analytics, predictive analytics, and basically come out with stories about players, the game, so that engages fans, and I think that's what sports fans want, and that's what you want as an operator to differentiate with your product.
Kenny, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's ridiculous to have people trying to collect data to base sports betting wagers on by trying to send them into the ballpark or even watch it on TV. So I've been at baseball for 13 years now. When I first started, one of the first things I worked on was our relationship with Sport Vision, and we were implementing the Pitch FX system. And we were installing cameras in all 30 ballparks to track, the path of the pitch and what's the spin rate on the ball and what's the break. And it was put in place for media purposes. And when you watch a baseball game now, everyone's used to seeing the pitch track and, where the ball crosses the plate. And that's because of the technology we installed. Over the years, we've advanced that to player tracking and other things. So we have our StatCast system now, where we've installed cameras and radar in all 30 ballparks to track everything that's happening on the field in real time. And it's led to new ways to enjoy baseball. So people now talk about launch angle, which is something that they weren't talking about 5 years ago, or exit velocity off the bat. So that was all put in place for one reason, which was really covering the game in media. Now that the laws are changing and sports betting is legal, it has the happy coincidence of, hey, we're actually tracking everything that happens on the field in real time. And then we did our deal with Sport Radar to take all that information and to distribute that out to sports betting companies so that they can use it to price markets. And this is now this past season, and it's really next season, now that the integration is fully done, is the first time that we're making that data available, which will lead to all sorts of innovation. And Wayne said in his introduction that we work with Swish Analytics, and that's a great example. So Swish now has access to that real-time data coming in and are able to do player props and different sorts of in-play markets that people couldn't do before. So, it's no offense to Nevada that they've only had certain types of markets. We didn't make the tools available to them. So now that we have this data, we're looking to do deals with all the different sports betting operators in the U.S. so they can take advantage of this and they can have more innovative, interesting markets to offer to our fans.
Yeah, don't you feel, and I'd like to hear all your comment on that, don't you feel that the data collection of the game, football games, 30 seconds between each play, that does affect the under. Baseball, all the numbers you're talking about. Basketball, how we break down the three-point shot. Don't you think that takes the way, that adds to the integrity of the game in terms of the sense that all these numbers people are analyzing, it isn't just back in the, this guy's going to throw the game for us. It isn't this backstreet sense of betting. Don't you think it enhances that this really is a Wall Street portfolio? You're analyzing stocks, you're analyzing market value.
Yeah, sorry to speak twice. If I just add one thing about that. Integrity means a lot of different things as you're talking about sports data. You mentioned the integrity of the data, which is really important, like making sure that the data itself is accurate, that, did Ryan Howard just hit a home run, or, did he just hit a single, or was it an error? Like knowing right away what actually happened. That's one part of data integrity. There's the integrity of the game. Are our players taking certain actions on the field because of the betting line? I don't really have a lot of real concern about that as it comes to Major League Baseball. I don't think our players are susceptible to that. I think they're compensated enough and they enjoy playing the game that I'm not overly concerned about that. But it would be, completely negligent if we didn't at least focus on it and do everything we can to get the information that we need. And then finally, it's about perception and making sure that our fans know that the game on the field is a real athletic competition and that, we as the league aren't going to call somebody safe, have our umpires call them safe at home because we wanted, the Nationals to win instead of the Astros because all the money was being placed on the Astros from some guy with a mattress company.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that, all sports aren't necessarily going to be tracked equally, right? Because every sport is different. If you think about, you talked about the fact that in football, there's that 30 seconds or whatever in between plays. That changes the dynamic in how you can collect data and how you can predict data. You think about, baseball. Baseball is, a little bit slower from that perspective. And there are things that you can do in baseball that you can't necessarily do in basketball because basketball is like this. You blink, you miss a play, right? So I think that the collection mechanism for each of the sports have to be different, which is going to ensure that we have different products and utilize the data in different manners. Now, I also think that, you make a great point about like the professional players are not necessarily going to be intimidated by, a change or sports bettors coming to them, et cetera. But then when you think about what's going on, you mentioned a college game, as the main game. And you think about everything that's happening in that space. They're going to need even more integrity in regards to tracking, because it's at least in the short term, it's amateur sports, right? We don't know what's to come there. But I think that the data for every different game has to be tracked different, captured different, the outputs are different. And I think what we've seen historically is that, I like to talk about my golf game, right? So, I swing the ball, I hit it out, and I got to take 3 off the tee, and then I chip one in 150 on the scorecard. It doesn't tell you that I was 3 off the tee. All it says is I got a par, right? And the detail is missing when you look at a box score. When you look at a box score, you're seeing the result. You're not seeing the process of getting to that result. You're not seeing the granular data points that a machine can look at and tell you what's going to happen in the game. And I think that's a really critical piece. And when you have those granular points, you could use it for good or you could use it for evil. And it's important that, there's the right partnerships with the associations to be able to use it for good and to be able to protect and actually to help enhance not only the fan experience, but to help drive what we're seeing happening and accelerate what we see happening in sports betting.
I just want to add one point, because there was one thing that I would have added to Kenny's 3 bullets, which was the integrity of the bet. So from the operator side, if the consumer loses confidence in the bet that's being offered to them, the book obviously suffers from that. So when I talk about partnership and having alignment with the leagues and with the teams, it is certainly in the fact that the operators want good data to rely on. Matt will attest to that, obviously. I mean, if they are not able to offer good bets, quite frankly, obviously they lose reputation, they also lose money. The other piece I think is interesting when we talked about what's going to happen in 3 years, and a lot of conversation about data and offering bets and in play and everything else, is there has to be a player acclimation period, quite frankly. I am completely unsophisticated when it comes to sports betting. I kind of understand parlays because they seem really easy, but when we get into this more sophisticated use of data and in-play proposition betting, I think a lot of operators are taking a step back to say, how do we actually lead consumers into that, where they get comfortable, where they understand what some of these sophisticated bets are that are going to be offered in the future. And you're seeing a lot now on free-to-play as a tool then to do that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think Sarah is absolutely right. There is an education that needs to take place in terms of customers to understand sports betting. I think overall, people have bet already years ago offshore. Now I think the biggest challenge is probably convert them into the legalized market. But I think most of the people, or a lot of people, need to kind of get up to speed in terms of sports betting. But I mean, everyone who loves sports basically wants to bet, even if it's just for entertainment. It doesn't need to be big amounts. And we will see a lot of interesting products coming out. I think storytelling elements that basically come out of a system like ShotTracker can kind of benefit the media business, but also the sports betting business, and create interesting content around sports betting. So it's not only kind of telling people, hey, bet on the end result or halftime result, which is kind of boring. If you look in Europe, for example, you have 300 different bets that you can place only on one game. Here in the US, we are not there yet. But I think we will get there soon. We will be having probably prop bets where you can place bets on the performance of players. People admire the athletes, so they might follow an athlete, want to place a bet on this particular person. And these are things that are engaging people and that we will see over time in the US.
Your consumers that come into the pack, how educated are they? Are they becoming more and more, listening to other shows as talks about the gambling asset? Are you finding a more well-informed consumer?
Definitely. I mean, it's growing. I think the early adopters are very well informed, and they're looking for that edge wherever they can get it, whether it's through VSiN or, just regular terrestrial radio here in Philadelphia or in Pennsylvania. But definitely, I think they're getting educated. They're getting smarter, and I think the people that are betting at home or on their mobile device or online are getting accelerated learnings through that experience and looking for information online. I think everybody's always looking for an edge when they bet on sports.
I think there's no doubt, and I think the people that just look at the box score, Like when they look at your par total and didn't analyze that you went in the water on one shot.
I'm not going to tell them that I was too off the tee
But
either.
I think that's the people that are really that once they make a mistake on a bet like that, then they search out for information and they try to get better data because they realize that this isn't the backstreet game where we're just betting there's some technology that you can apply to this. And that's where I think, and Kenny, you could speak to this, the leagues kind of have always taken the approach that betting is not something we want in our sport. Well, this is kind of the way the information and the data points have been. It's really financial analysts basically bet. It's no different than the stock market. And I think, do you sense that within the league offices that there's been more of an incline to talk about it? I mean, I noticed on the Fox pregame show, they're now doing, Terry Bradshaw thinks the Saints will win by 4 points. They're not quite going there, but they're trying to go there.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, just looking at my title, I'm now the executive vice president of gaming for Major League Baseball, right?
When did you get that title?
This morning. No, about a year and a half ago. Shortly after PASPA had been overturned, and I'd been working on some of the betting stuff as well as some other things, and there was some consolidation within the league office, and the commissioner said, look, I need a business person focused on sports betting. This is a real, opportunity and issue for the league. So I moved into that role, about a year and a half ago, and now my full-time job is focusing on sports betting for baseball. So yeah, it's certainly something that the league is involved in. You talk about Fox, they're an NFL partner and they're our partner as well. They did the deal with Stars to create this Fox Bet product. We worked with them during the LCS and the World Series to allow them to promote their Super 6 app before the game, which was, the continued evolution of us leaning into this space. And as I was talking before about the data we collect now, actually making that available to sports betting operators for the first time is, a big step for us too. Eventually, we'll start loosening up our restrictions to allow some ads to appear within the game, but we still want to do it sort of carefully. We want to make sure it's an entertainment product and a way to enhance the enjoyment of our sport as opposed to a get-rich-quick type thing where we saw a little bit in the DFS days a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that and the conversation around content and the cautionary tale around the world in oversaturation of advertising on sports betting and now the regulatory backlash that has resulted. And the U.S. operators have no interest in doing that. The leagues share that as well. And it's, again, you get back to sort of that partnership, like how are we going to address this so that there isn't this oversaturation like 2015 with daily fantasy sports, and then we saw the regulatory backlash. And are there creative ways then to incorporate content through talk shows that it's not so much in everyone's face all the time, or kids that are, watching the games. And so I do think that is one of those, while there's great opportunity, there certainly is great risk, and this does fall into that risk category, and pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. So, it has been somewhat of a blessing, I think, that the states have rolled out in the way that they have, and that it hasn't been a blanket sort of federal repeal and then enactment of sports betting. So it's sort of dripped slowly versus a big splash from a nationwide perspective.
So what words of advice would you have for entrepreneurs sitting in the audience that are looking for disruption within the marketplace? I mean, where do you see there's the variance that they can go?
I mean, know the regulations. I mean, gaming is unlike a lot of other industries. I think that, if you had some of the daily fantasy sports companies up here, they would probably talk to you about that it just is going to come under much more scrutiny. The flip side of that is that there hasn't been a lot of innovation, which goes back to the conversation that we started with. I mean, this is one of the last industries that's actually moving to mobile and online, which is crazy if you think about where we are. So through payments, there's a lot of innovation happening, certainly through data collection and products that now the books are interested in using. Those are all things I think that we're going to see a tremendous amount of progress being made. But again, licensing is expensive. It's a very highly regulated industry, so it's not always going to be a slam dunk.
ShotTracker strictly on basketball. Are you in what other avenues are you headed down?
Yeah, so right now we focused on basketball. Our company name is actually DD Sports, for Data Driven Sports. But we wanted to start basketball, and as you know, as entrepreneurs, it's really important to focus. We have the shiny object syndrome, so we have to really focus in on basketball. Now that we're at the point where we're starting to see proliferation, the technology is pretty robust, we're starting to have discussions around, what other sports that we can go into. I think what we've seen is that, many people try to use like a CV, computer vision type of approach, but, given the speed and the accuracy that's, or the lack thereof, associated with those approaches, it sets us up to be, really a lead candidate in being able to proliferate this across the market. So we're looking at, pretty much every sport, namely football, soccer, volleyball mainly, because if most volleyball courts are basketball courts, so it's easy. It's probably not the highest top betting sport by any means, but the good thing is that we have a solution that can benefit multiple constituents. And that's one of the things that I think that I would tell, to just piggyback Sarah's entrepreneurs, right? I think it's really important because this is a marathon. It's really important to be able to, suffice the need of multiple constituents. I think you also mentioned it, using it for broadcasts, using it for all these other purposes, using it for gamification. I think it's because it's a marathon, it's going to be really important to be able to satisfy other customers who are relevant today, with the opportunity of flipping it to, sports betting in the future. So
I think it makes sense to look where the pain points are in the current industry, and there are a lot of pain points. For example, when I left Sportradar last year and joined a company as a chairwoman, so I'm not non-executive but advising the company called Bet.Works, people were saying basically in the news, oh, Laila left Sportradar, a multi-billion dollar company, to join a company that is not more than a landing page in the internet. And I actually enjoyed that because at the point when I left, this company wasn't that big. So it was created last November, a year ago, and it's now a probably $100 million plus company already, because we saw a need for a betting platform in the US. There was no betting platform that were able, from our perspective, to handle US sports. All the European companies that came over were basically made for soccer. Soccer is the number one sport that people bet on in Europe. Probably 80% is happening on soccer. So we saw the opportunity that platforms suffered, that risk and trading teams that are actually calculating odds on behalf of the book, etc., that they couldn't handle US sports. People were sitting in London or somewhere else in the world, in Spain, but they were not located in the US. So we thought we need a US team that understands US sports and operates out of the US, because you cannot copy and paste what's happening in other jurisdictions and just bring that over. You have to Americanize the solutions, because America is totally different and a totally different market. People want to have sports betting more as an entertainment tool, while in Europe we are more like strict on what we bet on, so it's not entertainment per se. And I think if you look at the current company, I agree on what was said before, payment methods. The whole process of signing up for a sportsbook is painful. So if you walk into a casino in Nevada, you want to place a bet on a game, you have to go to the counter, you have to show your ID. Once you're ready with the registration, the game you wanted to place a bet on is over. So it all takes too long. The whole process of when you get your payments, when you win a bet, when you can kind of like get that back into your account and are able to reinvest it in another bet takes too long. So data, I mean, there's so much space for disruption on interesting data products. I think it's a market that's just about to develop, and there are so many pain points to solve. And I think technology is what we should use nowadays to kind of like improve what's there. And I think that's why so many people want to get into the space right now. It's a big opportunity.
So 2006, BlackBerry had 97% of the market share on all phones in the country, right? Nobody has a BlackBerry in this room today. So you do? Oh. Steve Jobs was told there's no chance, you can't get into the market space, but he was obviously different, and the software developers were. So I think we're at a time where there's something happening in sports betting today that there's going to be somebody's controlling 97% of the market. Where is the next step going? Where are we headed? And I think artificial intelligence is going to have to play some form of role in all this. I'd love to hear your commentary on that.
So I think you're right. I think that the tough thing with artificial intelligence, machine learning, is that it requires like a large subset of data, like enormous, right? And I don't. It's an opportunity because I know that the amount of data that's been collected is either not granular enough, or the quantity of that data is not sufficient. Because what you're doing is you're building, whether you're using neural networks or any type of models, you're building these models and you're training these models to look for specific things, right? So you have to do a pretty significant baseline. Now, with a neural net, once you actually train those models start thinking for themselves and start doing amazing things. But to get to that point, you gotta have a great subset of data, labeled data, to be able to train. So I do think that it's a pretty significant opportunity. There are some precursors that need to occur before we actually get to that point and we see some of the really true value. But I do think that it's a big opportunity. But you gotta have the data and label data pumping into those, to those machine learning algorithms for it to really see its full potential.
I'll make a comment about Nevada having the monopoly and the dominant leader for the past 50 years, and there not being a lot of innovation. This was 2% of all of their gaming revenue. It was a rounding error on their balance sheets. The operators did not put a lot of money back into innovating it. So I do think, obviously, the floodgates have opened, which is fantastic. And around, pricing, I think that there is a lot of opportunity for sophistication now. When we look at modeling and what the hold percentages are around sports betting, it's around 5%. Do we think that there is absolutely opportunity to increase that from 5 to 10, hopefully one day, from an operator's perspective? Absolutely. Would that be fabulous for everyone? Certainly, because it's going to give everyone the ability then to reinvest back into the product. So I do think that there is a lot of room for improvement in that area.
One last thing I want to say is, and I mentioned high-frequency trading before, and I don't know if everybody's familiar with that high-frequency trading and what happened in that market, but I think that that's a great example for a market that you saw was going. Imagine when you wanted to make buy a stock, you'd have to call somebody. By the time they take your requests and call to actually get a change, I mean, there's a significant delta in the price, right? So you may be, hey, I'm calling at 506, and by the time I call and actually make that order, it's 580. And what we saw in that market is that people were putting servers next to the exchanges to get the speed, because what they'd do is arbitrage, right? They'd see that request coming in, and they'd be betting billions of dollars and take advantage of the delta between 506 and 580. And I think that, that's a big piece. So when you look at those markets that have, developed a long time ago, and you look at, there's a lot of elements that made that successful, a lot of challenges that come with it. I think we need to look at those, because I think we're going to see, history always repeats itself to a certain degree. So I think we need to look at those to be prepared. So.
No, it's fine. I mean, what I was going to say is, sort of a little bit of what they said, that there really is no incumbent in the U.S. sports betting market. It's all new, and we're all figuring it out. But all these things that we've been talking about so far, I think, are the building blocks. But at the end of the day, where the innovation for me needs to come is we as an industry need to make fun games that our fans want to play. Like, the data is really important, but I don't think of it like high-frequency trading. Like, your general baseball fan just wants to, watch the game and maybe, again, is this guy going to hit a home run or not, or the Phillies going to win or not? And when you look at Nevada and you go into a sports book, it can be overwhelming. And there's all these numbers and names, and it's Phillies minus 150, and you're like, your serious bettors know what that means. You got to lay 150 to win 100, but your casual fan is Phillies minus 150. What does that mean? Are they favored to win, or are they not favored to win? So where I really want to see innovation in the mobile products is to make them more user friendly and say, bet $5 and win $7, or is Ryan Howard going to hit a home run this at bat, or is Aaron Judge going to hit a home run off Chris Sale? Who's going to have more RBIs? And just sort of things that are more fun for people to play. And I think the UI is going to be really important, and that whole direct-to-consumer experience is going to be important to get the casual fan in, which will then increase engagement.
Don't you think 5G is going to impact all that?
Sorry, I didn't mean to react like that. Yeah, it's a buzzword. Yes, as you know, it becomes easier to connect your mobile device to the internet and have faster speeds. Sure, but even on 4G and on LTE, you just need a better interface and a better product to make it more user-friendly as opposed to a list of markets and numbers.
We haven't used this word yet, millennials, but I watched, when I was growing up, I watched the baseball game because it was the only thing on. Then my kids, when they watched it, they watched ESPN highlights so they could do their fantasy sports, And now I got a 3-year-old grandson who can do about 7 things at one time, and I can't do any of them, right? So, I don't know if anybody's, like football games, I would think somebody's going to invent software that's going to be able to call the plays, because one thing we all do when we watch a football game, that's a dumb call, that's a good call, where the interactiveness of the calls, and then somebody's going to obviously bet on that. I just don't know where the limits are in terms of, and you can speak to it coming from Europe, how far advanced they are in terms of the imagination of what their bets are.
Yeah, as I said earlier, in Europe, on a simple game, you can place on 300 different events during the game, so that's a totally different beast, if you will. But also proposition bets that I mentioned earlier, we see that around Super Bowl here in the US, but we don't see that outside from the Super Bowl. So I think there's a lot of space for innovation. Speaking about football. So you have these commercial breaks, for example, if you're watching a football game. This is a perfect time to target people through personalization that are watching the game, offer them a bet, offer them to buy a jersey, offer them whatever they need, whatever they kind of want to see in that moment. So we have, for example, at Bet.Works, we have targeted solutions that we target the fan in the moment where he's winning, differently than in the moment where he's losing the bet, for example. So I think you will see some innovation in that space as well.
How many prop bets how involved is your book in prop bets?
You mean in terms of volume?
Yeah.
It's growing. Our business right now is probably about 20% online and mobile and about 80% retail, people coming into the sports book. We have 3 locations around Philadelphia, one actually down the street here. I think, going back to your point about millennials, I think getting those players to sign up and fund accounts and getting them engaged is going to be a huge challenge. And Sara mentioned, some of the tie-ups with partnerships and stuff like that. I think one of the biggest ones is the digital media tie-ups and betting brands partnering with digital media companies that attract those young people, because they watch stuff on their phone, they watch stuff on their iPad. They don't sit and watch a game on TV. You've got to go to where those people are and try and engage them that way. So I think a wave of innovation. Kenny talked about the front end. I completely agree. I think the front end, everyone has a European or US sort of sports betting front end. There's been no innovation in that, in my opinion. It's something we're thinking really hard about, which is V2 of what we just launched this summer. But I think getting to those consumers is going to be vital, and I think this next wave of not broadcast tie-ups as far as media companies, but digital media companies, I think is going to be massive.
Probably also social media. Everyone nowadays is on social media, right? People want to place a bet and then share the bet with their friends. So social betting becomes probably also something that's getting to involve more people and entertain sports fans during a game. Group chats where they can place a bet or share a bet, getting comments from their peer group on the bet. So we see some innovation in that space as well.
I think when I think about millennials, I think about the opportunity to be able to socialize with friends in a digital world. And I think that's a really, really critical piece where, you can be at the game, and how many times, you may be at the games with your friend and unofficially you're like, hey, I bet you $2 he doesn't make that free throw, right? So I think that there's something about being able to create this environment where your friends, whether it's your 5 friends, if we think back to one of the one of the longer standing traditions around March Madness, right, where people fill out brackets. they don't fill out brackets. I mean, some people fill out brackets by themselves, but most people are filling out brackets with their office pool, with a group of friends, and they have their side bets going on. So I think being able to engage with friends in a digital world, whether they're at the stadium, not at the stadium, their favorite team, based on them being an alumni or some association growing up, I think that's a critical piece. And I think when I think about millennials, that's a piece that I think can really help increase the trajectory for their level of engagement. I also think that the gamification of it, and you see companies are doing that today, right? Where they try to gamify the experience. Maybe you're getting points, maybe you're doing that. But again, I'm doing it with friends, people I know, people I love, people I have a relationship with. And I think that could be a critical piece for that audience.
So the NCAA passed the rule that players can benefit. Sarah, I'd like to hear your comment on this, on the likeness of the team, which I think is which is going to, I think in football, there'll be owners of college teams in footballs, but that's a whole other conversation. But it does affect, too, the marketing of where this is going. And I think there's going to be the college sport, especially in that area, is going to have some effect as it relates to gambling.
Yeah, tough. I'll tell you this. When I was advocating for AGA, we used to say that there was no better opponent than the NCAA for them to go up to the Hill and advocate for them to not have sports betting allowed. I mean, the fact that they don't pay their athletes, you've just sort of lost a lot of credibility and, susceptibility to who would actually be on the take. I mean, again, professional baseball players, professional basketball players, these guys are making gobs of money. They don't need to take $1,000. But an amateur athlete, hey, why not? And so I equate to their bury their head in the sand to the Nancy Reagan just say no era of drugs. Like, it's happening, it's here. Let's work in partnership. Let's figure out where there are integrity issues. But you cannot bury your head in the sand and think that this is going to go away. And so I think there's an opening, obviously, and the operators do want to work. I'm sure Matt can talk about this and they have with the local universities in detecting when something nefarious may be happening. But it's obviously an incredibly popular sport for people to bet on, and it's not going to go away. And transparency is just going to lend to, I think, more integrity.
Yeah, NCAA has no other choice than finally, I think, actively embracing sports betting. We have seen NFL pushing back for so long time against it, and they finally made their betting rights available and monetized their betting rights just recently by giving their rights to Sportradar. I think the NCAA will have to do that sooner or later as well. They can use the money that they're making on their sports betting rights to pay their athletes, for example. So college is the biggest sports that people bet on in the US. By prohibiting sports betting on college, we basically push that in the underground in the offshore markets. People that want to place a bet on college and have no legal channel to do that will simply bet offshore, as they might have done through offshore bookmakers for the last decades. And that's not what we want. We want tax money. We want that money to go to states, community, to be used for the society, to be probably used for athlete programs, responsible gaming programs. So there is a lose-lose situation if these amounts go offshore and nobody basically benefits from that. It's better to allow sports betting on college and then control what's going on, monitor sports betting on college, educate the athletes about potential risks that come with sports betting. So I think, or I would hope that they kind of like reconsider their current status.
They still get mad at people for betting for office pools. I mean, let's be honest. And the NFL, I love the conversation that they don't really want to get involved in sports betting, yet they have an injury report every week. Like, seriously, why would we have an injury report if we weren't concerned about sports betting? But I think we should open it up to questions. Anybody have any questions for the panel? We would love to hear it. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, who's we when you're talking about?
We
did a roughly about a 200 people basically ask in terms of sports betting. These folks, roughly about 78% didn't know what parlays were, over under. Again, exactly what you're saying, money line. The whole ask was, how would you want to bet? And exactly the whole thought was, well, I just want to say, who's going to win, who's going to score first, who's going to score last. And that's it. That's what sports betting to most people are. And we realize that, as I said, that audience is very small, actual betting in the world of casinos. So I'd like to hear your opinion on, and again, how can we forward that whole industry? And
Yeah, again, so that's right. The same point I was making is that the UI needs to change and become more user-friendly. And for us, as we talked about earlier, from the league standpoint and actually leaning into sports betting as opposed to, when we didn't really want it to be part of the game, we're trying to give operators the tools to make that happen, whether it's, also using marks and logos, putting it on our site, creating content on our site that explains things in a more contextual way as to, what the betting opportunities are. That's why we have our big partnership with MGM, and we're going to be creating our own sort of free-to-play app that we'll launch next year that'll let you make predictions on baseball games in sort of new ways that we then hope other sports betting operators will emulate and create these different opportunities. But yeah, I think that's 100%. That's where I want to see the innovation. And from a league perspective, we'll give everybody the tools that they need to make the best possible products.
Michael, I think we have a question over here, but real fast, Davyeon, before I was walking over here, it'd be really great to share the things that you're doing with the NCAA this year in college basketball, and what's going to happen, what college basketball is going to look like for the first time ever.
Yeah, so this year we are working very closely where you're going to see ShotTracker enabled in games this year. Additionally, the NCAA has a rule that they do not allow the electronic distribution of data to the bench area. I know MLB, you guys are doing that way ahead, right? iPads and in the dugouts, et cetera. Well, the NCAA does not allow that at the collegiate level. And we were able to work with them to get a waiver to actually test that this season. So it's a very exciting time for us. Data will be delivered to coaches on the bench, not just the box score, but going into granular data. What are the drivers to help you to see what's working, optimal lineups. What are the things that you do, whether it's a ball reversal and a paint touch or X number of passes that actually results in the highest points per possession. And they're getting that data. And from our perspective, our definition, people throw around real time a lot, right? Our definition of real time is, sub 8 milliseconds, right? So being able to sit on the bench and get that data in real time and be able to make, changes in your lineups, changes, oh wow, this lineup is working well for me. Or guys, if we make that fifth pass, every time we make that fifth pass, we're scoring 78% versus 22%. So we're very excited about that opportunity to be able to revolutionize the game of basketball, especially with an organization like, the NCAA and the conferences. So we feel very fortunate.
We have a question here.
Hi, my name's Garfield Fisher. I own a company called Average Analytics. And I'm very curious as to your opinion on, are you going to hold this or am I going to hold your hand?
I got it.
Okay, cool.
I'll hold your hand, whatever you want.
Good.
I just want a fast question.
All right. So look, I built an application that looks at off-field.
I want a question.
Off-field insight.
Question.
And,
Question. Please. Please.
okay, how important is knowing the player off-field for betting? Like the entire off-field footprint and analyzing text, video, photo, and audio so that you have an entire knowledge of the player off the field. Do you think there's a place for that on betting?
Thanks.
Athlete you're talking about?
Yeah, for the sophisticated player, absolutely. That's my point earlier about getting an edge and data. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that a really sophisticated bettor would like to know. And they do know. They already know that stuff. They've got people inside these organizations that slip information to them, and then they've got an edge. Happens all the time.
Here we go.
So the bricks and mortar casinos today, I think, Matt, you said that 80% of your experience were retail and 20% online. I think that's about the opposite that New Jersey has seen.
Yeah. It's going to flip for us as well.
Obviously, the demographic of the sports bettor is very different than the demographic of your casino participant today. What are the bricks and mortar properties going to do to take advantage of the demographic of sports bettors to get them into the property?
Well, we've already done that. We built a $10 million state-of-the-art sports book that attracts young people. We've seen a completely different demographic coming in since we launched last January. Younger people, younger males, some females as well. They come in and they spend time in the sports book. They'd never come to our casino in the past. And you're right about that 80-20. It's going to flip. It's going to flip within months.
And how do we get women more involved in betting? I mean, to me, that's something that, it's an analytical thing that they're really good at. I mean, women that can analyze a hell of a lot better than most men can. And you would think, when you take the emotion out of the bet, I like the Redskins because I root for them. I was just looking at numbers, analyze how do we get women more involved in gambling?
I'm at a high level. I'm guessing brands and products.
Yeah, offerings women's sports in a sports book. I mean, through offering it on the betting market, more people get engaged, more people get involved. So that would be an easy way to do it.
Sarah, you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think there's a lot of room for growth and innovation in this area. I think about when there used to just be a line of clothing around sports teams that was just tailored to men, and then they finally pivoted and did it for women as well. So I've heard from some companies that even their name of their company may be offensive to women. I don't know the whole psychology behind all of that, but I do think that this is an amazing opportunity then for books to sort of look at how do we offer more bets that women would be interested in.
No doubt, no doubt.
We have one more back here,
What the
Michael.
offensive names are.
Good morning. What are your thoughts on the future of betting on esports? When I open up the Parx app today, I can bet on all the brick and mortar sports. But do you envision a future where I can bet on the MLB esports league and not just an MLB league?
I think if somebody can figure out how to,
Handicap it?
everybody's talking about integrity.
Yeah.
I think that's the big question mark for the consumer is who's playing, what's the outcome going to be, is it fair? I think once you can let the consumer know that there is some integrity behind those games and those offers, then they'd probably bet them. It's happening in Europe. People are betting on them.
I think the market just hit $1 billion on a global market. So it's coming. It's huge in some areas of the world already, Europe, Asia. We see that it's definitely being a great product for the US market as well. I think you have to have an eye on the regulations because some regulations, I believe also in Nevada, says that you're not allowed to bet on esports if the participants basically are under, I would say 21 years, but I'm not sure, maybe 18, but I think it's 21. So there are some restrictions in terms of what the bookmaker actually can do with esports. And it doesn't make sense for a bookmaker to offer an entire tournament if you then have to take out some players basically because they are too young for people to bet on their performance. So that's a challenge from a regulatory standpoint, but I think the regulators have to be more innovative here to allow it. Same discussion like with college sports, otherwise these people bet offshore.
Any other questions?
Time for one more, right here.
You guys mentioned that there is no real incumbent in the space. I'm just wondering, with all the new innovation, who do you believe will lead the M&A activity in the sports betting arena?
Oh, who will lead the M&A activity? Yeah, I mean, I think you'll continue to see consolidation because you just can't have all these independent brands that won't have enough, economies of scale across the different states. And we're seeing it happen sort of faster than I even would have expected with Flutter buying, Stars Group and those guys combining. I think I wouldn't be surprised to see more of the established retail casinos starting to buy some of the mobile players. But consolidation will happen. I don't know by who.
So I think this is an interesting question, and there are obviously, I think people think that from a big national brand perspective, it'll probably be 5 or 6 major brands. But I think if you actually look at how casino gaming operates on a state-by-state basis. I mean, we're sitting here with Matt, and Parx Casino is extremely successful. It's a local casino. They have a very successful app. They're going to continue to grow. So it is unique in the sense that You can have big players on a state-by-state basis, including Maryland Live is another one, is a good example. They'll have something here as well. That, they're probably not going to have a big national brand per se, but I'm not sure that you necessarily need one. So it's a little distinct in that way.
Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate your attention. Thanks to the panel. I know I learned something. Thank you very much.